Palestinian militants have fired a barrage of mortar shells across the border with Israel in retaliation to hundreds of airstrikes targeting Hamas militant infrastructure. There had been a brief pause in violence overnight, allowing the UN to send in a small fuel convoy into Gaza. Joining me now live is former Australian ambassador to Israel, Peter Rodgers. Peter, thanks so much for your time. This is not the first intifada we've seen, of course, in this part of the world, but this one seems particularly more aggressive on the Israel side. Can you explain the politics and the timing?
Yes, I think in some ways, unfortunately, it's very straightforward. Benjamin Netanyahu, the current Prime Minister, has been through 4 elections in the last 2 years, is trying to maintain his hold on power. He needs to come out of this looking as though he's inflicted some sort of, quote, defeat, unquote, on Hamas. So his government, the Israeli Defence Forces, will continue to pound Gaza. There is a script for all this. This is just a variation on the script. There's nothing particularly new. The Israelis are depending on protection from the US within the UN Security Council. I don't know what the details of the discussions between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden have been, but the US will continue to protect Israel in the UN Security Council. The Israelis will pound Gaza for the next few days, and then there'll be some sort of ceasefire. But it'll only be a pause because in a year, 2 years, 3 years, we'll see the same script all over again. There's no solution in this because none of the parties involved in it want a solution. They want a pause, perhaps. They want some calm, but they're not prepared to do a deal.
Indeed, it doesn't seem so. A two-state solution has been negotiated and got nowhere for decades now. But looking at the bombardment in Gaza, does Israel have Hamas on its knees?
Definitely not. Hamas, I think one of the surprises in this chapter has been Hamas's ability to fire many, many rockets at Israel. They've developed a capability, despite what's happened in previous conflicts and previous Israeli actions in Gaza. And the figures for the Hamas and other Islamic groups, extremists stockpile are pretty frightening. They developed their own technology with a lot of help from Iran. Hamas has developed a homegrown technology in producing rockets. There really is no effective way for Israel to eliminate the threat from Hamas rockets unless it's prepared to completely control Gaza again, and it won't do that.
No, there's no indication, there's no appetite for doing that whatsoever. The lopsided death toll for Israel seems, for want of a better term, a PR problem. Does Israel risk losing support from key allies?
I don't. Well, I think it's some of those key allies are not very happy with the way in which Israel has conducted itself here. But the Biden administration, I think, unwillingly will continue to protect Israel and the Security Council until the Security Council has a resolution which attributes blame to both sides. Israel will draw a lot of criticism from the international community, including some countries it regards as friends. It couldn't care less.
Peter, Israel, as I see it, has a bigger problem this time around. It's not just from Hamas rockets coming from Gaza, but there has been civil unrest on the streets in Israel, and that is much more difficult to control.
That is a new element in this. There's been civil unrest before, but not for a very, very long time. And I think that reflects the sense 20% of Israelis, or roughly 20% of Israelis, are Arab, Palestinian, whatever term we want to use. They do live as second-class citizens. They are nominally equal in law, but in practice they're far from sharing equality with Israelis. After all, Israel proudly proclaims itself as the Jewish state. So that for 20% of Israelis, I think they've long felt a sense of discrimination, of being second-class citizens, and they are not necessarily great supporters of Hamas but perhaps more so of the Palestinian cause in general. But that has been a new and I think for many Israelis a very worrying element in this latest bout.
Yeah, much of it seems very insurmountable, at least where we sit at the moment. Peter Rodgers, thanks so much for your time.